All right, so this lesson is on trimming our wheel throne forms. We're using bowls specifically. Trimming is pretty similar regardless of the form, just the placement of the foot is different. And talking about the placement of the foot, we're talking about the placement where that exterior little ring is going to be on the bottom of our pieces, right? So the tools that you're going to need, I have a trick in how to measure the thickness of the bottom instead of you trying to guess the thickness of the bottom, which can be kind of scary because you don't want to carve through the bottom of your piece. You'll have to redo your project most likely. So these sticks and my pencil are for the trick that I'm going to show you guys in a second. You're going to need a couple sponges. You don't need a bucket with water, but you do want wet sponges that are clean. This one's super soggy. This one's only kind of soggy over here. You're also going to want a larger loop tool, all right? If you're trimming a lot off, you're going to need this one. I'm not going to be trimming a lot off this piece, but if you have like a huge chunk on the bottom of your piece and you trim off, you can start attacking it with this one first, a nice large loop tool. I also like to have a variety of ribbon tools. These are called ribbon tools. They're called ribbon tools because it's almost like a metal ribbon, so they have like a blade. They're not going to cut you blade, but it's a sharper. It's not just like a loop of wire. It's kind of like a ribbon of metal. I especially like this one right here. It almost looks like a weird little foot. It has like a heel and a toe. And I also like this one that's kind of like an arced side and a straight side. So this one's ideal, but sometimes you want a little bit of a smaller one as well if you're going to do some more detailed work. Sometimes they do break. Put it aside and bring it to me and I'll reglue it, all right? So don't just throw the tools out if they break. You're also going to want a pin tool, all right? So you have your wooden dowels, a pencil, variety of sponges, ribbon, loop tool, pin tool, okay? In addition to all of the tools, you're also going to need a chunk of clay. Don't want super smushy clay because it'll stick to the side of your piece. Pieces from the newer slug or a little bit dried pieces are ideal, all right? So you're going to want some of that because that'll hold your piece down. All right, so our piece is leather hard. This could be dried probably like another minute or two with the hair dryer, but it's good enough for now. I want you guys to study your piece before you turn it upside down because putting your foot in a proper place is really important. It actually adds stability to your piece. Stability meaning it sits better on a table. It's not going to be rocking and rolling. And it also adds a nice kind of visual aesthetic element to the bottom of your piece. You want the placement of your foot to be where the bottom of your piece starts to become the wall. So that curve where the bottom starts to become the wall, you generally place it underneath that area. If it's like a smooth curve all the way up, you have a little bit more freedom. But if you have a cylinder, it's going to be flat bottom, straight wall. It's going to be that wider one. It's going to be a plate. It's going to be where that well of the plate starts to become the wall. Always want to think about placing it underneath that. So you always want to study your piece before you turn it over. So I'm looking at this. It's kind of a soft round area. Right there is about where the bottom becomes the wall, right? So I'm going to eyeball it and put two little markers, which means that's where I'm going to put my foot. Okay? Two little markers. You're also going to study the thickness of the wall. So you're going to run your fingers down. My piece starts to get a little thick right about this. So a lot of this is on feel. You can see where I put a little fingernail mark. Those little marks are guides where I'm going to start trimming more excessively, all right? So anywhere up here, I'm not going to trim any. But from here down, this little chunky nugget right here is going to go bye-bye. So this extra little chunky nugget is going to get trimmed off, all right? So now that I know where my placement of my foot is and where my wall gets a little thicker, I'm going to figure out how thick the bottom of my piece actually is. And this takes the guesswork out. There's lots of other techniques, like with a pin tool and stabbing the bottom of your piece. Not gonna lie, I don't like stabbing my pieces. So I found that this trick is super helpful. So you have a dowel. You have one dowel resting across the top, and you'll see that some of them have these little lines all over it with pencils. Now you're gonna understand why. You're gonna rest one across the rim and one in the deepest part of your piece. And you're marked with a pencil on the vertical one. Make sure you know which mark is yours. All right, so I marked vertical, and then you're gonna take it outside your piece. And you're gonna have it flush against the wheel head. Mark again. So the bottom of my piece, what is that, about like a half an inch maybe? About a half an inch thick. It's not super thick, so I'm not gonna trim the tongue off, okay? You want your piece to be maybe that much thinner. So my foot's not gonna be a super tall, flashy foot, right? But I am gonna trim this excess amount right here off. So when I come around to help you guys, I'll probably ask you, how big is your foot? So I can see, because I don't want to put my hands on your project and help you and then carve through the bottom, all right? So this is a really good gauge and a really good guide, okay? Okay. So I'm gonna put this aside. I'm gonna remember which one is my marker, right there. Now that we got to know our piece, we're gonna turn it over on the wheel head. And again, our piece is leather hard, so you can handle it without being super sticky. If it's super sticky, hit it with the hair dryer again, or put it on the heater and trim a different one. You're gonna use these guides of the wheel head as guides to center the rim of your piece, right? So we want our foot to be centered with the rim. So generally, you're gonna try to center your rim amongst these lines on the wheel head, all right? I'm gonna check it out real quick to see how good it is. You can turn it on slow. And that's pretty solid. That looks like it's basically in the center of the wheel. If it's off a little bit, like right here, I can see it bumping over this direction, just gently shift it over, all right? But you want your rim of your piece to be centered. Perfect, thumbs up. So now you're gonna take that extra little bit of clay, and again, this clay should be not super squishy, because if it's super squishy, it's gonna stick to the side of your piece. So you're gonna pull off a couple little nubs of clay. Since our piece is centered upside down, we need to hold it in place. There's lots of gadgets and stuff that they have to hold things in place, but those gadgets are like $300. We just do it the old-fashioned way, figure out how to center your piece. Again, if it's bumping in one area, you move it away from that area. You can tell if it's bumping by looking at the rim. You can put your finger, if it bumps your finger, move it away. But having it centered is just as important, having it centered when you're actually throwing it, because you don't want a weird crooked foot, okay? So it's better to err on the side of having a couple little pieces too many than it is too few. These little pugs are stuck to the wheel head and just kissing the side of my piece. You're not like mashing the side of your piece, because then it'll make your piece deformed. So they're just kissing the side, and I'm pressing them to the wheel head so it holds my piece in place, all right? Another trick that I like to do, I like to use my pin tool, and I like to pre-score all the areas that I'm gonna trim off, just so I know exactly where I'm trimming. This also gives your tool an easier path to follow instead of gouging. So these little pre-scratched up areas give you A, a visual, and B, will help the ribbon tools to cut more easily, all right? So right there, all that scratched up area is going bye-bye. And this area in here, about 2 millimeters, is going bye-bye. All right, so now we have our path to follow. We pre-scored with the pin tool. I like to start with this guy, this ribbon tool. It looks kind of like a little foot with a little heel and a little toe. You don't want to attack it with the flat side. You have more precision and more control, and you're less likely to gouge your piece or rip it off the wheel head if you use just this little heel area. Make sure the tool's clean, there's no crusty dried clay on it, right? I like to start getting rid of the massive amount of excess clay. Like right here is all going by. It's also important that you work, remember, 4 o'clock. I'm not pressing hard, I'm letting the rotations of the wheel with a consistent pressure in my hands to remove that clay. You're not gonna attack it like this, you're gonna let the rotations do the work. So I like to actually trim pretty fast. So if you're on the wheels over here, switches are gonna be up. All right, so once we got that bulk, you can see it kind of removed pretty easily, especially with that pre-scoring. So this is a subtractive method to create a foot on your piece. You guys did your pinch pots with the additive feet. Now you're doing a subtractive method to create stability. So this will actually make your piece more stable when sitting on a table. Stable on the table. Also adds to the aesthetic appeal, right? So now this inside curve is really echoing the outside curve, is what we want. It's not a thick spot at the bottom. Remember, this isn't very thick, so I'm not going to take too much off. You can see I'm just using the heel of this ribbon tool to have more precision. You can see that I'm trimming from the outside in and leaving a little nugget for right now to see how deep I'm going. Now I'm going to get rid of that nugget because I think I've taken enough off. You don't want to leave that little nugget in the middle because then you just have like a weird fat chunk in the middle. Again, remember these are kind of like blades. So you want to have the sharpest part touching the clay. Now I'm going to use a little bit of the flatter side of my ribbon tool just to kind of compress and smooth out that bottom. So we're just one little pass with the flat side. You can see I'm not removing a ton, I'm just compressing it. I'm going to switch around to this rounded side again. I like to use this rounded side to help shape my pieces. You can have some fancy feet with little carved out notches. You can have them be more discreet like what I'm doing. But essentially you want your foot to have balance and aesthetic lightness to your piece. All right, you want your foot to be with a beveled edge so it's not sharp where it hits the table. You can do that by gently holding this tool at an angle, both on the inside and the outside of the foot. So now you're going to take your not so wet sponge, because you don't need a lot of water with trimming. Just tidy up the foot, make sure it's nice and flat, make sure there's no crumbs on it. Clean up that inside area, bottom of your piece, smooths everything out. Again, you do not need a lot of water when trimming your piece. Let me stop my wheel, check it out, see how I did. Oh, there's a little crumb. Let me get rid of that crumb. We don't want any crumbs on our bottoms of our pieces. All right, so I'm happy with how that looks. I'll write my name. And date it. And we'll gently pull these pugs that were holding your piece down to the wheel head away, freeing your piece. This clay can be used again, whether it be used for trimming another piece in the wheel or putting it into the recycled clay area. Now gently pick your piece up, rotate it over, and then you would use your not so wet sponge again and clean up the rim. You want to clean up the rim, make it nice and smooth. If it got dented at all, you can just kind of smooth that out. We also have that rim enhancer that I can show you later on. If it became kind of misshapen, we can re-round it out with a rim enhancer, okay? So once you're done and it looks how you want it to look and it's perfect and looks lovely, you would put this piece in the back on the greenware rack.